Hello, everyone. It's Bactrian, and today we're going to be talking about Pierre Poilievre and whether or not the Conservative campaign is perhaps starting to spin out a little, even at this early of a juncture. I didn't really think I would be suggesting that, to be honest, given that, they entered into this into not the worst position, but that's where we are. So, what do I mean? Well, there was some recent reporting. This came out yesterday from the Global News, and I think the Globe and Mail had a similar article, but that was paywalled. We don't want to mess around with the paywall, so we're going to be looking at the Global News one, and this is an article that is citing various sources from inside of the Conservative campaign, and it does not paint a that great of a picture. It makes it sounds pretty bad. It particularly at this early of a juncture when they really should not have morale this low. So let's get into it. So I'm not going to just read the article, but to summarize, essentially, as they start off with a quote from Tinyeke, I can't pronounce his name, Corey Tinyeke. He was Doug Ford's campaign manager. Or still is Doug Ford's campaign manager. I think he briefly subbed out for someone else and brought this guy back, and was a communications director for Harper. And essentially he's saying, and I agree with this, that the Trump stuff is very serious, and they wiped the entire issue set off the table for most of the electorate, and now it's just the Trump stuff. And we'll get into the numbers on that in a moment, but I agree with that pretty much. And he essentially said that you either react to Trump or you're going to get drowned, is what he said. But that's not really what's of interest. I mean, it is interesting that Doug Ford's campaign manager would say that. Of course, it's newsworthy. But what's really much more of interest is that, so multiple conservative sources describe a shambolic central campaign with an isolated leader. That is very interesting. And most sources spoke on a condition that they not be named. This is pretty normal. I mean, of course, I imagine conservative partisans will say, and fair enough, I understand why this would be kind of vexing, but, oh, well, that could be just anyone. But I mean, there's a pretty good track record with these things. Normally, they don't just make stuff up, as a general rule, at least of this sensitive of a nature. And so going further, they essentially say that these are fairly senior people in the campaign, and essentially that their criticism is that, like they want the Conservatives to win, and they even agree with their current thing, but they're saying that they have gotten to basically all of the massive wins they were having up until a couple months ago, as demonstrated here, their gigantic surge in the polls. It got them a bit too comfy, is essentially what this is saying. Yeah, the overconfidence, arrogance, and meanness of the Poilievre group has really started to hurt them a little bit, said a party source. The meanness they're referring to is stuff like having Pierre Poilievre's, and this has been a long-running thing, his combativeness with Doug Ford and his unwillingness to collaborate with him. I mean, something that might demonstrate this as an example is that Poilievre and Doug Ford, they actually spoke for the first time ever last week or the week before. But when they recently spoke, that was the first time they had ever spoke in any context ever. It seems a little odd. Seems a little odd. You wouldn't have developed a relationship with the premier of the premier of the largest province in the country, but then also one who is a conservative and is, pretty right wing. He's of course. Doug Ford has adopted a very different kind of messaging that's obviously worked extremely effectively for him to win over a lot of, particularly like unions and stuff like that, right? But at the end of the day, aside from some limited changes on things like the minimum wage and stuff, his policy agenda has remained largely the same from when he got elected in 2018. And he's, been very, a conservative through and through on things like the the carbon tax and stuff like that. So it's kind of bizarre that he would have such a combative tone with him. I mean, right? It kind of to speak to a sort of, and I understand why this mentality might come in, but it kind of speaks to a confidence and overconfidence that you were going to win and that you didn't really need to collaborate with these guys and perhaps get concessions from Ford on various things, and maybe have input on messaging, right? So I mean, some other stuff too. They talk about, yeah, I can't think of a conservative campaign that's seen the wheels come off so fast and so hard and so early. Thursday was day 4, and everyone is already running out with their hair on fire. They did not prepare. The ground game is a complete and utter mess, the source added. Um, these are pretty damning things to have come out. Yeah, I'm literally getting messages from people in the war room saying, I'm worried I'm going to get fired every day I go in. Like, it's miserable. No one is having any fun. This is not good stuff. You don't want this stuff coming out about your campaign this early on. Like, it's not good. And what it would suggest, and what I would really strongly suggest that people take away from this, is that, this is probably fairly on the money. And there are logical reasons why this might be the case, right? So we've seen that Poilievre is sort of unwilling to alter his message too critically, right? I mean, he's changed his slogan to Canada First for a change, and he also has some variations on it. Like, I saw recently at an event, he had a slogan that said "Workers First for a change," like stuff like that, right? But the fundamental message and the core thing, he hasn't really changed it all that much. And in areas where he did it a bit too late, and he's not really seen as owning or being competitive even on the issue of how to respond to Trump. And perhaps, conservatives might say, and the Poilievre camp might say, well, sure, Trump is one issue, but we've got all these other issues. I mean, look at just the cost of living crisis and all of this stuff over the last few years. This didn't all suddenly go away. The underlying economic conditions didn't suddenly get better. All of the, the inflation, these other things, that didn't suddenly go away. And I agree, of course. I mean, people have been really pressed with cost of living in the country over the last few years. And yeah, that obviously hasn't changed, and the tariff stuff is only going to make it worse and exacerbate those conditions. However, when you look at polling, so this was a Leger poll. This is a Leger poll that came out on, I have the opinion polls thing here. Yeah, this came out just before the election. This came out on March 23rd, this Leger poll. It has, so the most important, of these 3 responses, basically this one, should the most important question is, should the Prime Minister and the government should strengthen and grow Canada's economy. This one is change the direction Canada has taken over the past 4 to 5 years and improve life for Canadians. Those both, 33%, 24%. The number one question that people have for this election is, what they say it's about, is who the best Prime Minister and government will be to deal with President Trump and aggressive U.S. trade actions. This is at 36%. And you can see that among that group of people, the Liberals lead 59%. That's a big problem for the Tories. That's a huge problem for the Tories, particularly because also, so you have the second and third question. So, second question, 33%, change the direction Canada's taken over the past 4 to 5 years. The Conservatives have 56%. So they have, within the margin of error, but still, in theory, a less of a percent of, a smaller issue in people's minds. But then where it starts to get more bad is that, who wants to strengthen and grow Canada's economy, so people who are interested in that being the goal for this election, the Liberals and Conservatives are tied. This is not seen, the Conservatives aren't seen as having an advantage on that question. There's more information for this, right, where the top number one issue, and this was a week or two ago, and maybe it'll have changed. I mean, Carney and Trump had a call yesterday, and then afterwards Trump notably stopped the governor moniker and didn't talk about the 51st state thing. So maybe he'll have cooled down slightly on this, and this will go down as an issue a bit. I don't think that's going to be the case, though, particularly because you have things like the Liberation Day, quote unquote, Trump's Liberation Day, where he keeps saying that April 2nd is going to be Liberation Day. They're going to do a huge round of tariffs on, no one really knows what at this stage. This stuff isn't going away. And at the outset of the election, it's 32%, the largest issue by far. Inflation 21%, right? After all of the last few years, which again, nothing went away. Healthcare, which is normally the largest the largest issue in any Canadian election is normally healthcare, so 10%. And then housing affordability, 10%. So the cost of living stuff, the two cost of living issues are at 31%, tied with tariffs as a single issue. And then if we look at the breakdown of, so for those issues, if that's your top issue, who you're voting for, so tariffs, 32%, again, the largest issue. 51% of people who are voting on tariffs, or who that's, their largest issue, it's the number one issue facing Canada today, liberals. Liberals. The largest issue for conservative voters, whereas for inflation, it's 29%, right? Sorry, jumbled my words a bit there. If you look at for inflation as an example, it's a much smaller proportion, is essentially my point here, right? Conservatives don't own that issue anywhere near as much as liberals own the tariff issue, and that's kind of a big problem for this whole strategy of not totally pivoting the campaign message and doing it a bit late. It suggests a kind of unwillingness to adapt to the conditions. And I would suggest that things like this article, as an example, they don't really, it's not coming from nowhere, right? People wouldn't be saying this inside of the war room and inside of the conservative campaign unless they felt like this. Like, I can't really remember a similar piece of reporting in, for example, the 2021 campaign. Now, maybe someone could correct me. I don't know. I really don't remember anything like this coming out, particularly this early on. That's just kind of this bad seeming for painting a picture of what it's like inside of the campaign in 2021. Or in any elections before that. I think that Poilievre is starting off this thing in a sort of a pretty negative position, and it sounds like internally they understand that in the conservative camp. And I mean, this article is clearly getting a lot of play. As you can see, it's the top on the trending thing. There's a reason why these people leak this stuff, because they desperately want Poilievre to shift gears and shift his campaign. And it'll just remain to be seen whether or not he will. I mean, as it stands, it's not like things are getting any better for the Conservatives in the polls. It's been a few days since the election was called, and the Liberals continue to rise in the polls, primarily at the expense of the NDP. The Conservatives are holding steady. They are holding steady at, high 30s, where they were before. It's not been a dramatic shift. But from when the election was called on the 23rd, the Liberals have gained 3 points in the CBC tracker, and in the 338 Canada, they're up to now a 99% chance of winning the most seats. It was 91 at the start. And they just keep increasing in their vote share and their projected seat total. You're reaching a stage where if Poilievre is unable to, because these things do work through momentum, right? Election, I am a big believer in the kind of a momentum theory of elections and electoral outcomes, right? So if you're the Poilievre camp and you're at this key juncture now at the start of the election and you can't get any juice going on moving things in your direction, that is going to become more and more of a problem the longer things remain stalled and the further and further ahead the Liberals get. And it really would suggest that the Poilievre camp might be beginning to spin out a little bit. They might be beginning to lose control, and it might start going badly, and it could get worse for them. And to be clear, we will see. I don't know. I can't predict the future, but this is a very, very worrying sign for them, and I really think it should give Conservatives a lot of pause to consider, what this campaign is going to look like and what this election is going to look like, and maybe try to change tack, because clearly what's happening right now isn't working, and this election is it's on the I believe the writ was it's in April 28th, so we're less than a month away, right? Like this thing is going to happen, and then it'll be over with. And if the conservatives can't kind of get it together and get back control of the messaging, they're going to do very poorly. They are currently projected to get around, yeah, like 125 seats. Not great. Not great. They are currently at 120 seats. So what? They're going to get the exact same amount as 2021? That would be a pretty bad outcome, and I think the conservatives would be very disappointed by that. So it should maybe give them pause that this sort of reporting is coming out at this early of a juncture. That's my primary point with that, and and we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. Maybe they'll get really good reporting in a few days. Maybe Carney will make a bunch of gaffes and things will start to go in their favor. But I wouldn't count on it. I definitely wouldn't count on it. And once these things get to a certain point, they kind of get locked in as outcomes, and it's very hard to shift or have things move. So we'll see. But with that said, this was Bactrian, and I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, like and subscribe. I'm going to be making more election videos about the election and politics in general. And yeah, hope you enjoyed. Have a good day.